Hey, what's going on? Thank you so much for watching. It would mean the world to us if you could just scroll down, like, hit the subscribe button for the Snaps YouTube channel. It goes a long way towards helping us out. Now, let's dive into some college football.
Over the weekend, Georgia running back Trevor Etienne booked on a DUI and other charges there in Athens, Georgia. And we're not here to beat Trevor up. We're not here to scold him. And this isn't Game of Thrones. We're gonna be yelling shame, 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 and ringing the bell at him as he walks through the town. Like, that's not it. But Georgia's had some issues over the past couple of years. We've known from the major accident after the first national championship that unfortunately cost the lives of some young individuals, to other DUIs and speeding tickets that have risen over the past couple of years. Does Kirby have a problem? How should Kirby handle it if you're in his shoes right now after everything that has kind of unfolded after the past couple of years there in Athens?
I think it's just the nature of what it was that is probably setting off all the alarms, just for the reasons you just said, the tragedy that Georgia's experienced in this exact same sector of issues. If it was academic integrity, you'd say, oh, that's a bad look. That's bad by Trevor Etienne. But, Georgia, and I don't know if it makes the same kind of headlines as it does since it's involving a vehicle. I think it's also important to remember here, like, Trevor Etienne just got to Athens. Like, there's, a lot of talk around, does Georgia have a culture problem in Kirby Smart headlines with vehicles and issues with those and things like that? Like, he's been on the team for all of 15 minutes. And so I think there's something to be said for, like, acclimating to a culture, acclimating to a locker room. Hey, here's how we do things. We do this, we don't do this. Hey, really steer clear of this kind of thing. That's landed us in some trouble before. We have a history here. So I think that's probably worth noting contextually for this whole thing. Does Kirby Smart have a culture problem? I have a hard time buying into that narrative just by how he operates and how successful Georgia's been. I will say, I don't think you can have a real deep-seated culture issue and win as much as Georgia has over the last couple of years.
I 100%. Kirby is doing everything that he needs to do to make sure those guys understand how to be essentially a grown-up, a man, both on and off the field. And that means, like, not driving like an idiot around, the classic city, not going over the speed limit, not drinking, driving. Like, you can only do so much. And I'm not going to sit here once again and ring the bell and yell shame, shame, shame when I did some bad things, and not super bad, but I did some stupid things when I was in college in Athens. Like, it's a fun place for those that have been to Athens, those that have been to the classic city. It's a damn good time. It's a party 365, 7 days a week. Hell, I had teammates that would go out every single night of the week in the offseason. And some pretty big time stars that had big time NFL careers were going out every single night in Athens, Georgia. It's a really good time.
Aaron, here's my question for you.
And I don't know what you do, though. I really don't know what you do, though. No.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's sort of my question is, like, and you've obviously seen this firsthand.
Yep.
Like, coaches obviously send the message and set the standard and all that, but really it's, okay, can you police it within the locker room? Like, if you're the quarterback of that Georgia team or you're a leader in that locker room, is it something where you pull Trevor aside and say, hey, man, we're not down on you. This is not shame, 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 like you just mentioned. But at the same time, here's the standard. Here's what you have to be accountable to. Like, how much policing goes on within the locker room and how much is responsible by those guys to get that done?
Well, and I agree. I think that there has to be some leadership from the players at some point, because we've all been in rooms with the adult is saying the same message over and over and over again. And you kind of sit there and, Kirby can bring in another speaker and someone can tell this incredible story of a tragedy that occurred because of drinking and driving or driving too fast. But, and I'm not saying like the kids are numb to it, but there does get to a point, we've all been there, where the adult says the same message the 10th, 11th, 12th time, and it kind of goes right over your head. You need your peers kind of locking you up and saying, hey, man, like, this is who we are. We don't do this. But I do think that there is something that could be done from a coaching standpoint. And I don't know if Kirby's gotten to this point yet or if you think this would work. But at what point do you say, I don't care if you're a superstar or not, you're gone or you're suspended? Like, do you send that message of, hey, Georgia plays Clemson week 1. Etienne was our big get this offseason. Do you suspend Etienne for the first game of the season? Like, have they gone to that point where Kirby does need to suspend someone or kick someone off for the team to get the message through? Or is that too much?
I think repeat offenders, that's probably worth doing. I don't know. I love Nick Saban's stance on it when he gave his famous speech about how he handled Musa Muhammad when he was at Michigan State, basically saying, if I kick this kid off the team, like there's no more oversight from the adults within our football team or our
Mhm.
coaching staff to like help him get better. So I probably would really steer as far clear from the kick a kid off the team practice as I could. But I do think suspension, especially if we have another situation with a Georgia football player that's
Mhm.
gone about this. Like if Trevor Etienne gets in trouble again, it's like, hey man, you messed up one time. It
Mhm.
happens. Athens is Athens. You're a kid who I have to believe is probably doing just fine in the NIL department, have a lot of things at your fingertips. But if it happens again, like we got to really start to
Mhm.
communicate some consequences, not just internally, but also externally. So if it happens
Yeah.
again, I'd have an issue. But again, I think Trevor Etienne, having been there for a cup of coffee,
Mhm.
maybe make sure he understands where we're at, culturally, standard wise, and kind of set the tone that way within the locker room.
Well, and I will say this, like I think Georgia's done a good job this offseason of really being pretty quiet. Like Ohio State's getting in all the headlines. They're like kind of this sexy team with the Hirewood chip and some of the guys that got in the transfer portal. Obviously, a lot of attention on Alabama. There's gonna be a lot of attention on Texas. Like I feel like Georgia's been kind of right where Kirby Smart wants them. Like very quiet, very hush hush. No one's really pumping them up too much. Everyone knows they're elite, and everyone kind of knows that hey, they're going to be contenders, but it hasn't really bid the big headlines. It kind of just, fallen back a little bit, which is crazy for a team that's won 2 of the past 3 national championships to not be kind of the main focal point in the offseason. And now you get the one time you are, it's because of a bad thing with Etienne. So I'm with you. I'm not suspending Etienne for the first game, not kicking him off the team, but listen, it's a mark against your record, man. And hopefully the message just does not go whoosh, right over the guy's head going forward when Kirby does sit them down, I'm sure today, reiterating how we handle our shit both on and off the field at the University of Georgia. So we'll see. We'll see, man. All right, let's move on to the next thing. Moving out west, a man who does make a lot of headlines is Deion Sanders. Deion said on a podcast, I believe it was last week, that his son, Shadur and Travis, in his mind, he already knows where those guys are going to go to the NFL. They're not cold, which, hey, listen, I don't want to play in the cold either, especially I'm the quarterback. Don't want to play in the cold. But essentially that I'm going to dictate where those two end up going in the NFL, which we've seen it happen once with Eli Manning a long, long time ago. 2 decades ago, Eli Manning said, I'm not going to San Diego. Don't even think about picking me. The trade occurred. He ends up in New York. Philip goes to San Diego, all that. Can you go to the NFL as for Deion and say, here are 4 teams, and these are the only 4 teams I could draft my son? Can you do that really? Even though you're Deion Sanders? Like, is it too much? Is he crossing the line here?
Do we even know who is going to be in the top 4 of the NFL draft next year? There's a lot of variables here that it seems like Deion is really trying to nail down. And I guess you could probably throw a stone and hit 1 or 2 of those teams. The other thing I would say is if he's talking about cold weather being a factor, they currently play football in Boulder, Colorado. That was the job he took. That was where he took his son. That was where he took Travis Hunter. If cold weather was a factor for success in football, I would maybe look back at the track record as to where they're at right now. The other thing I would say here with Deion Sanders and Shadur and Travis, I totally get the thought process behind, hey, I want what's best for them. These guys, one is a son to me, one's like a son to me, tons of talent. I understand that. But I also think we're starting to kind of hear a little bit of rumblings around Caleb Williams and how involved his dad is and how NFL teams feel about that. If you're lukewarm on Caleb Williams' dad being involved, how do you feel as an NFL organization around Deion Sanders telling you, hey, you're not going here. Hey, he's not picking him here. So, I mean, Coach Prime does things his way, and that's why I think to a degree he's had the success that he's had. But if I'm an NFL team, I don't know how I feel about that one. If I'm drafting Shadur Sanders, I'm drafting his dad along with it. I think it's a lot to draft. There's a lot that goes with drafting either one of those guys.